VikesNow, January 17th. We are what? 4 days away, 3 or 4 days away from the NFC AFC divisional round postseason, which is my favorite weekend of sports, assuming that my basketball team isn't in the NBA finals, because it's really the elite teams that are left. We have four dazzling matchups. First, however, before we get into playoff predictions, I'm here with Josh Frey, and we're going to talk about the Vikings because the show is called VikesNow. Apropos topics are on the agenda. How are you this week, my man?
I'm good, man. Diving into the offseason topics. Tons of articles going up, both our sites. So yeah, been a busy week, but it's been fun getting into these offseason stuff. So glad to
Yes,
be here.
notably, we are 99 days away from the NFL draft. And
Countdown's begun.
yes, it has. It's under 100, and then less than 8 weeks now from free agency when legal tampering begins on March 11th. So here's what happened. As you know, in the flesh, the NFC North was very profitable last weekend. There's a decent chance that the Bears and the Packers, or one of the teams, gets to the NFC Championship, especially because the Buccaneers beat the reeling Eagles. So the common sentiment among all Vikings fans was, holy shit. This happened a lot faster than we thought. We thought the Packers might be mediocre for however many years. Nope, not unless they suddenly regress next year. So what, if anything, coinciding with people's anxieties or lack thereof, what, if anything, should the Vikings change about their offseason plan now that the landscape of the NFC North seems to have accelerated over the weekend? Because, hey, the Bears are going to have the first overall pick if they want it.
Yeah. In terms of like personnel, I don't necessarily know if it's time just because the Lions and the Packers won a playoff game for everything to go absolutely haywire. We blow up the entire thing, start over from scratch. I don't necessarily think it's that time because, I mean, at the end of the day, if this team had Kirk Cousins and Justin Jefferson and all these guys that were hurt throughout the entire season, I think this team has a fairly serious argument to be right in the mix with all of these teams like the Lions and Packers in the NFC North. So I, I don't necessarily think that the Vikings need to do a ton in terms of changing their offseason plans. Like, I still think that the five things that we laid out last week when we talked, I think that those things are still the main things that I would try to fix with this team going into the offseason. Get those extensions done, retool the defense a little bit, figure out something in the running game, figure out the quarterback position. Maybe retaining Brian Flores becomes a little bit more of a priority, just because of how dominant the Packers and Lions offenses have been, especially down the stretch of the season and last weekend in the playoffs. So I don't necessarily think that a ton needs to change. I think the only thing, if anything, needs to change is, and I don't even necessarily know if this is a change, but I just think that if the Vikings were to draft a quarterback, I think that Vikings fans and the coaching staff need to show patience with that guy because it's the Packers blueprint. We need to steal the Packers blueprint this offseason. Draft a guy, stash him behind Kirk Cousins for a season, hopefully, assuming he's still around. And even if he gets in 2024 down the stretch of the season and puts up a couple really bad games, I don't think that we should panic and say that, oh, this isn't the right guy. We need to go draft another guy next year. I think that if the Vikings draft a quarterback this year, stick with the plan, develop that guy, and hopefully 2025 comes around and he's a good player. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, all these guys are rookie quarterbacks. There's going to be mistakes. Like, Jordan Love made mistakes at the beginning of the season. And even like down the stretch of the year, that Giants game was pretty horrendous. He's a first-year starter. He's going to have these bad games. CJ Stroud had a couple bad games. That week one against Baltimore, that game against the Jets back in December. Like, these guys are all going to have shitty games. And at the end of the day, we need to establish some patience with whoever the Vikings end up selecting. And I think that goes to the coaching staff as well, because when Kirk went down, there was the carousel of all these guys. Whenever anything bad happened, they switched to the other guy, and then something bad happened and they went back to the other guy. I don't think that can be the blueprint moving forward. And I think the Vikings and their fans just need to show some patience with whoever they draft.
So while you watch the Lions advance and then the Packers surprisingly thump the Cowboys, did you feel an added sense of urgency about drafting a quarterback now? I'll give you an example. Yannick Eckhart's been chilling in my place through Christmas now into the beginning of the offseason, and he was flirting with the idea of, you know what, maybe we get the best defensive lineman on the board at 12 and then see what's available at round 2. But after watching the Packers and the Lions win, he turned to me and said, they're not going to have time to wait on the quarterback. The guy's clock has to start now. Do you think the urgency was sped up at all, or do you remain the same that they should be drafting a quarterback in round 1 no matter what?
I think my preference would obviously be that they draft a quarterback, but I also think that if the quarterbacks start flying off the board at the top of the draft, like say the Bears take Caleb Williams, and then New England and Washington follow up with Drake May and Jane Daniels. Maybe New York gets in there as well because the Daniel Jones contract is an interesting situation going into the offseason. Maybe they get in the mix too. I don't think that the Vikings should panic and reach for a quarterback if they're not there, but
Mhm.
if there's a quarterback there, I think they should go get him.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to write an article about this in the next couple hours. The Vikings should really hope that the New England Patriots prefer a free agent solution at quarterback. I don't
Yeah.
think that Jared Mayo will say, hey, I like Mac Jones. We're doing this again. I think it's the best for the Vikings, not that the Patriots care, if they say, hey, you know what? We're going to go sign Kirk Cousins, or hey, we're going to trade for Justin Fields. It's the best case scenario if that number 2 pick becomes available. Because then, the rumors have told us that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah was interested in trading for Anthony Richardson or Bryce Young. If the Patriots don't need a quarterback, then that number 2 spot is gettable, and that's where you can get Drake May, which is who this guy wants. All right, we nibbled around a lot of the quarterback stuff, but I want to ask you. You know that Kirk Cousins, even if he takes a hometown discount, is probably still going to get $35 million per season. You know that the Vikings need a starting edge rusher, preferably a better defensive tackle. Some say they need a cornerback. We both agree they need some sort of running back juice. A lot of cap will probably be allotted towards free agency. So taking that into account, plus Cousins' asking price, what is your preference for the Vikings' plan at quarterback? If you were Kwesi, what would you do? Not what you predict. What would you do?
What I would it's what I laid out just a couple minutes ago. It's re-sign Kirk for a year, and if there's a guy like a Jaden Daniels that falls to number 5 or whatever, I'd trade up, and that pick would be the Chargers pick, and I think that's a really reasonable trade partner with the Vikings this offseason. I'd go get that guy and let him sit behind Kirk for a year, and
Okay.
like we've laid out for the past few weeks, just don't put a ton of pressure on him early. Let him learn the offense, and then hopefully 2025 rolls around and he's ready to rip and roll. That would be what I'd do.
Okay, so you are totally in on getting Cousins back at about
Yeah.
what's your threshold? 40 million or 35?
I mean, obviously the cheaper is the better. I think 35 would be. I think that's a really reasonable contract, especially we've talked about this too. They've got all that money already on the books with the dead cap with the 28.5 million. So you're really only throwing an extra 6.5 million his way if you sign him to a $35 million deal. So I think that'd be very reasonable. I'd push it up to 40. I don't even know if if that's. I think he'd take that hometown discount at 35 million if it meant that he's helping the Vikings keep some cap space and help them be competitive next season. So I do think that deal around that area is going to get done.
Okay. Interesting footnote. I was writing another article about the price of what that trade package will be. I keep seeing some folks thinking like, oh, they'll trade their first, a second, and then a deal sweetener to get their quarterback. And I keep thinking, where on earth are you getting this price tag? This is going to cost similar to what the 49ers and Dolphins finagled, which was 3 first rounders. If they want to get up and get Drake May or Jaden Daniels and not dink around. And you know what got me to thinking, if all of those theories last summer or even the summer before, if the Vikings could have landed Trey Lance this season, man, that would have been perfect. Knowing what we know now, I mean, he might suck still, but it didn't matter in hindsight. 7-10. If they could have swung whatever 3rd or 4th rounder for Trey Lance, it really would have been cool to see him cook after week 8. But I digress. As a matter of predicting it, Mr. Draftman, we have this debate. There's a lot of ardent Kirk supporters that say, you know what, damn it, he's going to be just fine at age 36. That Achilles is going to be good as new. He's getting stem cell treatment in the Caribbean. So those folks say, you know what, go out and get Newton from Illinois, the defensive tackle, or get the best edge rusher on the board if you don't get one in free agency. As a matter of predicting it, weigh in on the quarterback versus defensive line debate at 11. Like, do you see the pros and cons there, or are you gung-ho quarterback so long as they're not doing a ponder like reach?
I definitely see the pros and cons with it. Obviously, I think they need to figure out that quarterback room for the future. I don't think they can re-sign Kirk and not do anything else, especially if it's only a 1 or 2 year deal. I think that they need to have a long-term solution in place, especially with Cousins going into that age 36 season, potential that he gets hurt again or just doesn't play as well as he did last season. So I do think that it needs to be a point of urgency. But again, if those quarterbacks start flying off the board early on, and there's only so much the Vikings can do to get up to one of those spots to draft a quarterback, because if a team like the Patriots, the Commanders, the Giants are set on a prospect, they're not going to move that. They're not going to move off of that pick and give it away to the Vikings so that they can go draft a quarterback, especially with Washington and New York being in conference rivals with the Vikings. So I think if the Vikings aren't in position to draft a quarterback, I think the next guy in line for me would be Johnny Newton at number 11. If the quarterback is just completely off the board and they don't want to take a chance on like a JJ McCarthy, Bo Nix, I think Johnny Newton would be my first overall choice there, just because he offers so much as a pass rusher and a run defender. He's a little undersized, but he's got some ridiculous athletic ability. He fights with his hands, and his motor is absolutely unreal. And the Vikings need to add a little bit more beef to the interior of their defensive line. So I think that would be my number one choice if the quarterback's not available.
Okay. What I've been, thinking about the what can happen on draft night, especially if we don't know the identity of the Bears pick, if it's theirs to begin with at all. It almost feels like if Kwesi, because it can get so funky in the first 5 picks, it almost feels like Kwesi might have to pull off a trade for the number 2 pick or the number 3 pick before the draft. Like one of those, like, hey, March 15th, the Vikings have landed the Patriots pick for 3 first rounders. Because then that way, assuming, this is a big assumption, but assuming they love Drake May or Jaden Daniels, then they don't have to monkey around with, oh, we tried our damnedest to get up into the top 3, but couldn't do it, just like last year with Anthony Richardson. So it almost feels like there might be moving and shaking before the draft. Do you agree there, or do you think if it happens at all, it's going to happen on draft night?
I completely agree there. I think if it happens, it'll probably happen right around where that free agency period starts. And again, it'll all probably come down to what exactly happens with Cousins, whether they decide to do that 1 year deal, 3-4 year deal, or he just walks entirely. Then whatever happens after that, I think that's when the sense of urgency really kicks in. And that's when they'll probably, if they do, they'll pull off the trade then.
Yeah, I keep telling friends and family in person when I talk to them about the Vikings that there's a lot of stuff for the Vikings to do this offseason. Extend Jefferson, hopefully extend Hunter, nail the draft, get free agents. But the first domino is Cousins. No matter how you try to say, well, maybe they'll bring him back and they'll also draft JJ McCarthy. Everything starts with the decision of Cousins. If they say, you know what, you want your 38-40 million, we're just not going to be able to do it. Then you got then the rebuild slaps people in the face. And I think a lot will embrace it, but it really feels like I know that is the first domino. All right, we'll put the Vikings aside, unfortunately, sorrowfully, for a second here, and let's get into your division round predictions for these playoffs. We kick off Saturday. All these games are just marvelous, with the little side dish of Tampa getting there feels like the little engine that could. But let's kick this off. You have the Texans at the Ravens, and the first Saturday game. Who wins and why?
I think Baltimore is going to pull that one out. I think they're going to be well rested off of that bye. I know they're dealing with a few injuries, especially on the defensive side of the ball. But I mean, at the end of the day, CJ Stroud, rookie quarterback, he is definitely capable of making some turnover worthy throws, even if the stat line doesn't necessarily suggest that he turns the ball over a ton. I mean, even last week against Cleveland, he had a couple balls that definitely should have been picked off and just fell to the ground. So I think Baltimore's defense is going to be able to capitalize on that, similarly to how they were able to do so in week 1 when these two teams met. So I think Baltimore wins that game.
Do you think Dalvin Cook has a role with the Ravens, or is it just 2 or 3 throwaway carries?
I think it's kind of going to be a similar situation with the Jets, where
they've
kind of got their guy in Gus Edwards. They trust him. So I don't really see a ton going Dalvin Cook's way this weekend.
Notably, the Ravens, if you're looking for a team to cheer for, the Ravens have Dalvin Cook, Michael Pierce, and Dan Chisena on the practice squad for anybody who feels orphaned by these playoffs. All right, the dreaded Saturday night game, those Packers at those 49ers. The 49ers feels like the last line of defense if you do not want an NFC North team to get to the Super Bowl. Do the Packers continue this mystical little bashing of the Cowboys?
I don't think so. I think it's another similar situation to with Baltimore, where San Francisco, they had the Christian McCaffrey scare, but sounds like he's back to practicing again, should be fully healthy. And I said it before the playoffs started, as long as the 49ers have all their stars on the field and are healthy on the offensive side of the ball, I don't think that there's a team in the NFC that's capable of beating them. So I think the 49ers win that one.
You know what's wild to me is that the point spread is favors San Francisco by 10.
Yeah, that's
Man, I like to predict the point spreads in my head, and that one I had like 5.5 because of how good the Packers played. But we always say Vegas knows, so hopefully they nail that one. The next game on Sunday, the first game, probably the most blasé, if you had to call one blasé, is the Buccaneers and the Lions in an NFC Central bout. Who wins that one?
This is where I got an upset.
Really?
I think last weekend was Detroit's Super Bowl. They needed to get that monkey off their back, and they did it.
Timberwolves?
Yeah, I
The
think
old Timberwolves.
yeah, I think they're kind of content with where they're at for this season, you know. And I think Baker Mayfield's kind of got that mojo back where he's running around making those plays. It doesn't always look pretty when it's the Buccaneers, but that's just the way the Buccaneers roll. They play tough, gritty football, and there's no quarterback that fits that town better than Baker Mayfield right now. So I think that they pull off a stunner this weekend and upset the Lions.
You know what's so weird to me, and I don't know if I've said this on this show or to you in private. Baker Mayfield feels like the first number one overall quarterback in recent memory that somehow plays with house money. Like
Yeah.
every other first overall pick, not a first rounder, first overall pick, whether it's Stafford or Lawrence, it's all of this bastion of expectation. Like, well, damn it, you better play well. But with Baker Mayfield, I don't know if it's because he was cut loose by the Browns. We felt bad, but it's just like, hell yeah, Baker's making plays. It's not like, well, damn, like Trevor Lawrence. We're like, well, he better make the leap at some point. This guy's generational. And with Baker, it's all like it's like a frat boy that we're cheering for and not the first overall pick. Do you ever feel that way?
I absolutely feel that way. I mean, especially in recent years, like the way the thing in the Browns ended, and then that horrible Panthers team that he got forced
Yeah.
onto, and then all of a sudden he's on the Rams down the stretch of the season, and he's making that start, making those plays, and seems like he's back, and now he's with the Buccaneers, just doing his thing, winning the NFC South. So yeah, I completely agree with you. I mean, he's definitely playing with house money. He's got a chance to make a pretty big amount of money this offseason in free agency if he plays well this weekend. So yeah, kudos to him.
Yeah, he feels like I should say it this way, the first overall pick in recent memory that has immunity or doesn't have the heat on him of like, well, this guy, I can't believe it. It's just like it's almost like he is a third rounder like Cousins or Wilson, where you just like, oh yeah, of course he's pretty good. We've watched him in flashes. It's really bizarre, but hey, I love it.
No, I mean, I think that part of that is just because he started his career with the Browns, and that's where quarterbacks just go to die in the NFL, especially when he was actually drafted there. So I don't think that a ton of expectation was necessarily put on his shoulders to begin with. And then he led them to the playoffs for the first time. And then after that, it was all gravy. So
yeah, I will always maintain that down the stretch of 2021, I think he played hurt and he wanted to be that Farvian gunslinger that, hey, I'll play through anything. And that hurt his next big contract, a shitty system with the Panthers. And then that just memorable game against the Rams where they threw him in and said, go do the thing. And he's like, sure, I could do that. It was like his Dobbs moment before Dobbs had a moment. All right. The final game, I think by far is the most fascinating and fun because in years past, we watched the Chiefs and the Bills play in this very game, and it's the Titans of industry or the monsters of rock matchup. But this year they're very flawed or injured. With the Chiefs, it's like every time you turn on national TV and the Chiefs are on, you're like, oh, MVS is going to drop one. Kelsey's going to look like TE4. And then with the Bills, it's like, oh, they don't have any of their defensive players. They're both so still star-studded at quarterback, but everything feels like they're limping through to hopefully maybe get to the Super Bowl. So all of that said, in Buffalo, Mahomes' first road game. I can't believe that. Who do you got?
I think that Josh Allen's going to be able to pull this one out. Like you've kind of laid it out already. I just don't trust this Chiefs wide receiver core at all. Travis Kelce has kind of looked like a shell of himself at times this season. And even if Buffalo's defense is limited, I think that they're capable of hanging with the guys that the Chiefs have on offense right now, outside of Patrick Mahomes, obviously, because Mahomes is great. But I think it's going to be a close game, but I think Buffalo is going to be able to pull this one out. And again, they get the monkey off their back by beating the Chiefs.
And then we would have a tremendous AFC championship between the
Oh
Ravens
gosh.
and Bills in
Yeah.
Baltimore. And I'm going to end the show on this note. I swear that of all years, I feel like the NFL has been begging for an opportunity to give Josh Allen the MVP. I do not understand why it isn't he and Lamar 1A and 1B, where if the vote came out, let's say there's 100 voters, I know there's more than that, but let's say there's 100, it should be like 53 for Lamar and 47 for Josh Allen. Josh Allen's statistics blow Lamar's out of the water, even though he has the Farvian again turnovers. It just seems that since they've been playing a playoff style season since December 1st, I can't understand why he's not getting more MVP credentialing. I mean, do you have an explanation for it, or
I mean, the only thing I'd have is just how bad the start of the season
yeah.
was, like
Mm-hmm.
with how that Jets game went down in week 1 with everybody watching them, and then Aaron Rodgers gets hurt, and Zach Wilson beats Josh Allen, and then it kind of was downhill for about 10 weeks there. But yeah, they definitely picked it up in December, and they've been winning all these games because, not necessarily because of Josh Allen, but I mean, he's definitely stepped up his play, and he's that playoff game against the Steelers was absolutely incredible.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I mean, he's definitely one of the most talented quarterbacks in the league, and MVP's turned into a quarterback award. I do think that part of it was also just all the stuff with Tyreek Hill going for 2,000 receiving yards
Mm-hmm.
potentially, and then Miles Garrett and TJ Watt, all these guys being defense first teams that where they were the true stars of their roster,
Mm-hmm.
leading those teams to the playoffs. So I think that might be part of it. But yeah, I think Josh Allen's, especially since December started, he's been absolutely fantastic.
Well, yeah, when I crunched the numbers before the playoffs, they both had about 4,500 yards passing and rushing altogether. Then Lamar had 29 touchdowns and Josh Allen had 38. And I'm
Yeah.
thinking, all right, like, and it would be one thing if we're talking about Cousins here or somebody who the media is like, yeah, we don't want to vote for him. But this is Josh Allen, who I think for 4 seasons now we've wanted a reason to put him over Mahomes, at least in people's flashy power rankings. So to me, I understand that Lamar Jackson is probably the most valuable player by a strict contextual definition, because you take him away and put some asshole, they're going to be 4 and 13. But I really think that this vote should be split. And if you pull up Vegas sportsbook odds, it's like a no-brainer that Lamar's going to win the thing.
Yeah, I think again that also probably comes down to just how dominant Baltimore was
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
throughout the entire season. Like they didn't really have a truly bad week throughout the entire season. And they knocked off a ton of these playoff contenders. Like they dominated the 49ers. So I think that's part of it as well.
Yeah, the Ravens were my preseason Super Bowl pick to win, and I maintained that throughout the season. And I truly believe that based on the way Lamar Jackson plays, like similar to Cam Newton, he's got one shot to get one. And then, unfortunately, because of the toll on his body, he'll probably start to slow down before a true blue pocket passer because of the sheer number of hits. So this is kind of like Giannis a couple years ago in the NBA. Even though he'll get more, this feels like it's got to be somebody's year. It's probably going to be Lamar's. We'll see if the San Francisco 49ers want to thwart that. All right, sir. We'll be back in 7 days to chat about the conference championships, and then probably start to wiggle into some free agent targets and stuff like that. So get your list ready. Any closing arguments?
No, that's about it. I mean, it's a great weekend of football, like you said, to start the show. So let's enjoy it.
Yep. All right, man. Talk to you in 1 week.
See you then.
Later.